possibly this is one of the starkest illustration of how we have in Sir Keir Starmer someone who would seem his whole credo, his whole belief is in international law, almost at any expense, even possibly President Trump now threatening to torpedo support for the Chagos deal. But is the Prime Minister right? Sir Mark Lyall Grant served as UK Ambassador to the United Nations and National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister and joins me now. That is an interpretation of the stance that Sir Keir is taking. If it is a correct interpretation, how supportive would you be? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, let's make one thing clear at the start, because President Trump has blown hot and cold on this Chagos deal, and actually that isn't really linked at all in any way to the decision whether the United States can use Diego Garcia to launch an attack on Iran, because whether Britain has direct sovereignty over Diego Garcia as of now, or it is leasing it back from Mauritius, as would be the case after a deal is done, America would still need British permission to use that base for an attack. So President Trump is using the fact that he wants permission to use that base for the military operation on Iran as a leverage, as it were, by saying, we're not going to support the deal unless you allow us to use the base. So there's a little bit of diplomacy and game playing going on here. But to go to your fundamental question, it appears that last year in June, when America launched military strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities, that Britain didn't give permission for the use of RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire or Diego Garcia, although they don't comment on whether they were asked whether America wanted to use those bases. So I think for a Keir Starmer government, as you rightly say, he would believe that under international law it would be illegal for the UK to give that permission. And he has to weigh up that legal position with the special relationship, because this is potentially quite a big hiccup in that relationship if President Trump does go to war with Iran and Britain refuses to allow its facilities to be used.
Noting that you served as both the National Security Advisor and an Ambassador to the United Nations, were your counsel sought as to how far the United Kingdom should back any action taken by the US in Iran? What would your counsel be?
Well, personally, I think you can make a legal case for saying that under international law and under British law, Iran poses both a regional threat and a threat to the UK, and that therefore it would be potentially legal for British bases to be used. And I think, given the strength of the special relationship and the importance of that, I would be inclined to accede to the American request. But as a condition for that, you would want to know what is the objective of this military exercise? What does success look like? What is the purpose? Is it regime change? Is it an attack, as President Trump was suggesting in that clip you just played, Nick, to prevent Iran having a nuclear weapon? Well, he claimed that the attack last year achieved that already. Or is it regime change? So I think if it's a directly security-based attack, then I think you can make a case under international law, and given the strength of the bilateral relationship, I would be inclined to suggest that we do allow the base to be used.
Really enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for your time today, Mark. Sir Mark Lyall Grant, former UK Ambassador to the UN and served as National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, 11 after 8. Listening to that is Dr Alonso Gurmendi Dunkelberg, who's a Fellow in Human Rights at the London School of Economics, contributing editor for the international law blog Opinio Juris, and a member of the International Law Association's Committee on the Use of Force. Same question to you, if I may. What would your advice be to the Prime Minister if President Trump, if the US Defence Department was to ask to use RAF bases? Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. Well, I think it's important to clarify, what does international law say about use of force, transboundary use of force? And the conditions are very simple. One, you've been attacked, which in this case, Iran hasn't attacked anyone. Two, you have consent, which in this case you do not have. There's no consent by Iran to use force in Iran. And three, you have consent of the authorization from the Security Council, which again, you don't have. So there is no recourse under international law for an operation of this sort. And I think it's good that there isn't, because these operations, these rogue operations all over the world trying to quote unquote free societies, have never worked, and they always produce crisis. So why would the United Kingdom, both legally and politically, agree to destabilizing the region?
So, Doctor, if these are rogue operations, what do you call a state killing its own citizens?
Murder. I do not condone that at all.
So
the Iranian regime is violating human rights.
So what should the rest of the world do?
Well, I think it is important to separate both the moral and legal claim of saying what's happening in Iran is unacceptable, and the idea that bombing people will solve that.
Do you think saying that will achieve anything, Doctor?
No, but I turn the question to you. Do you believe that bombing solves things? Look at the Venezuela example. They've done the least possible intervention.
You've asked me a question. Yes, sometimes bombing does solve things. Yes, I take you back to the Second World War and other events. Yes, not always, absolutely right. But sometimes, unfortunately, might is right. And I don't know in this case, and I take on board what the former ambassador said. You need to know what the end goal is. But the idea that the United Kingdom would unilaterally say to supposedly our closest ally, you can't use our bases, is at the very best short-sighted.
Well, I think it depends on what you want to construe the special relationship to be. I think friends and allies, and especially partners, are able to say to each other, I do not think that destabilizing a government in the Middle East is going to produce good results. Even policy-wise, it's going to create people fleeing that country. So if you want to not have a lot of Iranians fleeing...
But the flip side to that is let the murdering continue. And I'm not comfortable with that. But it would appear
of course, I'm not comfortable with that either.
Well,
I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with the Iranian government violating human rights at all. So, I just don't think that bombing a country will result in ending of hardship.
The bombing hasn't begun, has it? I mean, I think, isn't it rather the threat of bombing that we want to explore now? And you want to see as much as a unity as you can among allies, saying, right, unless you stop murdering your own people, we might bring on strikes. Unless you stop nuclear development, we might bring on strikes.
I just don't believe that is a sincere argument. I bring the case of Venezuela. Venezuela has basically replaced Nicolás Maduro with Delcy Rodriguez, who is the head torturer of the regime, and everything continues as it is. They've only replaced Maduro for Donald Trump. So right. I don't believe that Trump is a human rights advocate that wants to save the Iranian people. I don't understand why you do.
All right. Well, you are right there, but I don't know that we can always say, therefore, that any kind of military intervention is right. But listen, that's what a conversation is about.